that we have here at the university in relationship to comments, discussions, issues, emails, neighbors showing up in person at either our campus safety office or at the student affairs office within our area of responsibility, as well as at a monthly meeting we have that's called the Sun Hill Task Force Community Meeting. And the list that we have generated up here is pretty much the common list of concerns that are brought to our attention by neighbors from the community, which is called the Sun Hill community, which to my understanding, most if not all of you live within that particular area. Now, that is a list generated primarily by non-students, neighbors that live in the community that live near you, next to you, across the street from you, around the block from you, etc. We also encourage you as students who choose to live in that particular area or that community to bring concerns that you may have to our concern, to our attention as well. Because at the end of the day, you may have some issues with your neighbors as students, and you have rights as well, absolutely. But one of the changes or one of the differences that you have to understand is whether you live on campus or off, if you are a Widener University student, part-time or full-time or graduate student, you operate underneath the Student Code of Conduct that governs you as students, whether you're on campus or off. And a number of the things on our list here can be deemed violations of the Student Code of Conduct. So, with that being said, we're going to encourage you to always be on the positive side in relationship to this particular list. So when we talk about noise, as was shown in the video, one of the biggest concerns that neighbors have is from Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday night. If you live on 14th Street, 15th Street, Glen Terrace, 16th Street, Washington, Sewell, the list goes on, Ridley Avenue, the list goes on, all the way up to 18th Street. Now we're seeing problems on 19th Street. Noise is the first indicator, but generally speaking, where there's noise, the same thing happens on campus. We often find alcohol and underage drinking. So when you see us put this list up, noise for me, tip of the iceberg. Major concern for us, tends to lead to the police being called. So you want to be on the right side when it comes to that. Now, our experience has been this. Over the last few years, and I've been here at Widener for 7 years. The majority of students that come to these orientations, right, we normally conduct 2 of them. The majority of students that come to these orientations tend not to be the people that end up violating the policies. The ones who violate tend to be the ones that don't come to these, all right? So they're going to probably be your neighbors, fellow students, but your neighbors. We're going to encourage you to talk with those individuals so when they decide to have the parties, when they're parking on people's lawns, when they're parking in handicapped spots, right? When there's trash and high grass and pissing in people's yards, right? And all those things. We want to encourage you to discourage those types of behaviors. Because sometimes people hear it better from their peers. They don't always hear it when they're being preached to by the administrator. But we don't look at it as preaching. This is education and intervention. And I'll tell you why. If you violate the law in this city, an ordinance, a statute, or the law, and the city holds you accountable to that, and we receive a report related to that, we're going to hold you accountable as well. It's what we call double jeopardy. So you need to understand the importance of once you choose to live off campus, you don't want to be in the business of high uncut grass, trash all over the place, illegal parking of any sort. If your guests do those types of things, it comes back to you sometimes. So you sometimes have host responsibility, particularly involving parties of any kind. So you want to make sure you think about these things that are listed: disorderly conduct, behavior that's below the expectations that we have of you as students, whether you're the host or the guest. Now, coming out on a Monday night, we do these not because we want to hear ourselves talk. Some of us have families and small children. We'd clearly probably be home, right? We're here to help give you information that will hopefully help you stay in good status and on the right side of policies and the laws that govern this city. If we find violations happening, and I am the point person for the campus, when complaints come in, they come directly to me as a judicial officer. If I get your name on my desk, I'm going to address that. We're going to call you in. We're going to want to know what's happening. We're going to want to get to the bottom of that. All right? So once you choose to live off campus, don't assume that means now we can do whatever. It means actually the opposite. To me, it means you should even be on a higher standard, because you can ruin and tarnish the reputation of the institution within this community that we're working to build a better relationship with. That does not sit well with the higher, right? The higher ups at the university. It should not sit well with you either. Now, most of you, if not all of you, if you live in the Sun Hill community, you either live in, more than likely, houses that share a wall, or sometimes row home style, where it's multiple folks that are in a row sharing a wall. That's the most challenging type of setup to have when it comes to noise, parties, vandalism, smoking, things that travel through a building, through a wall, underneath doors, etc. Now, as I said earlier, you may have some same complaints about students and or other members of your community. We're going to challenge you to be the bigger people and not be on the wrong side. We're going to challenge you to make sure if you have issues with neighbors that you practice suit. Sometimes it means calling the police. Sometimes it means letting the university know what your concerns are. You live in a no rat, no snitch mentality era now. I get that. So you don't want to rat on other students. But the reality is, if they're violating your rights as a community member where you're paying to live, you may have to take that road and possibly let us know about students that are not doing what needs to be done within the community, because they're going to mess it up for everyone. So we're going to encourage you not to be a part of a problem house situation where the place that you live in is reported 3 times for partying and or violating policy. You can be cited for the Rowdy House ordinance in this city, which means that you can potentially be evicted from your apartment and also fined, and then your landlord or the owner is fined as well. And the police don't have to notify you if they put you on the checklist in that respect. So don't assume if you go to a party or you host a party and they don't come in and arrest anybody or cite anybody, that that automatically means that you're not in trouble. That could mean that they shut the party down, strike 1. Another party happens at that same house. They come in this time, shut the party down, strike 2. Everybody thinks it's all good because nobody got cited. And they're like, oh, they just shut it down, no big deal. They come a 3rd time, that could be the one where they bring the paddy wagon, and now people are going downtown and they're looking for any underage drinkers that may be at your event to use against you. And if any of you are juniors or seniors, which most of you should be, not necessarily all, because there are some exceptions, but the last 2 years we've had parties where people have been cited in the numbers of 35 all the way up to 70 plus individuals. And the hosts of those parties, they end up going downtown and get arrested, and then they face counts for every single individual that was underage at their party. And if you're not familiar with that part of the law, I'm going to suggest that you familiarize yourself with it. Because we have a couple of your classmates who you may know or not know facing a lot of fines based on the amount of freshmen and sophomores that were at their party, that were served alcohol or given access to alcohol. And what you need to hear is, if you host a party and underages are there, when you face a count for an underager, you face a fine of up to $2,500 per count, maximum, $1,000 minimum. So if you have 20 people underage at your party and they get cited, you get cited, they get cited, but you're going to face a count for each of them. Do the math. Thousands of dollars can be the fine. Now, does that happen to everyone? Absolutely not. But like speeding on the highway, everybody doesn't get pulled over, but you don't want to be the one who gets cited. So make sure you keep that in mind as you look at the ordinances of the city you've now chose to rent in, or own for that matter if you happen to be an owner. That there are things that I call the fine print that you need to make sure you're familiar with, because those are the types of things that show up on police reports and you don't think about it until it's too late. So we're going to encourage you to be familiar with these things. Indecent behavior, a laundry list of that. Over the years, everything from trampling people's flower beds. You know, these parties are in the front yard and the backyard, and yards are back to back. And when the police come running through, people are breaking people's fences, trampling their flowers, peeing in people's yards. The list goes on. All of those things are against the law. All right? And what I'm going to encourage you to do is not be a part of the problem, but be a part of the solution. Now, as students, like anything else, you get sometimes typecasted as all students are bad. You know, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. We don't believe that. But what we do is we address problem situations. We don't let things linger and keep going on and on and on. So I would value this experience that you're having, but don't put it in jeopardy either by understanding this part. Too much of anything isn't good for you. All right, so make sure you keep that part in mind and familiarize yourself with the policies.
So a big piece of the experience is partnering with your neighbor. Somebody brought that up earlier, the neighbor relationship. It's really critical for you having a good experience.
Did that last time.
So being a good neighbor means monitoring all of these different aspects. And Dean Lawrence talked about some of the things that we saw in the video. In addition to things that I've been here for 10 years, my entire time here, we've had complaint year after year after year that repeats. Same thing from the video, noise, parking issues, disrespect, and some of it is you reporting on your neighbor and some of it is your neighbor reporting on you as a student. So it kind of goes both ways. So we encourage you to go ahead and connect with your neighbors. So reaching out, if you haven't already done so, go and knock on the door. Check in with folks, let them know that you're there, connect with them, share information so that you know how to reach them and they know how to reach you if you ever need anything. It's really important you also know what resources are available to you. One major resource is the chestercity.com website. This source gives you all kind of information about parking, about recycling, about trash. How many of you know about trash removal, for what day your trash goes out? Okay, not a whole lot of hands went up. How many of you know about your recycling, which day the recycling goes out? Okay, so same folks. So ladies in the back are ready, but the rest of you are not. So I would encourage you to go to the website. It tells you based on where you live, what day of the week trash and recycling is. How many of you already work with your landlord to make sure you have an appropriate trash can? Okay, so not everybody has that. So what happens when you have just trash bags outside? They don't pick them up because they don't know what might be there. What else happens? Especially when it's warm outside. Bugs, squirrels, other kind of animals get in there and they tear it up, and then your whole lawn has all the trash all over it, and it doesn't just go to your lawn. The animals don't realize that it goes to everybody's lawn, so it's a mess for the community. So making sure you have the right trash receptacle. It sounds like a small thing, but it's a huge neighborhood issue, so making sure. So those are part of your checklist for tonight of things to take care of. Some of the other parts that happen with this is the parking piece. It's really, and the area around your property. So most of you live in homes that are 80 years old or older, and with those homes there's an issue of parking because when people moved in there, they at best had one vehicle for their family, and now many of you, how many of you have at least 3 people living in your house? Almost everybody here. And how many of you have more than one vehicle that is attached to your house? Everybody. So it's really hard to find parking, yes? It's generally a problem in our area. So that's an issue too for your neighbors who are elderly, because they'll go out and they'll go and get things at the store and then try to park by their house, and they can't because there's 6 and 8 cars parking in every spot, and they're having to go 2 and 3 blocks with their groceries and that sort of thing. So it's sort of that mutual respect piece, is understanding that you as a student have an opportunity to park at any of the lots on campus. You as a student also need to understand snow removal. And it's fall now, so the leaves are falling outside, so all these things are happening. How many of you know from your lease who's responsible for landscaping in your property? Most of you. How many of you are responsible for snow removal yourself? A bunch of you. If you don't know that answer, you need to go home, check your lease. If it doesn't say that in your lease, you need to talk to your landlord, because some of you, it's clear in your description on your lease, and it says the landlord will do it, and for some of you, you need to do it yourself. It's critical you know that, because when the seasons change, you need to be prepared for what to do, how to take care of your property. You know, obviously, from coming to our orientation, that the university has policies and guidelines in our handbook that govern not just you living on campus, but your off-campus behavior. And the other part of it is that there are certain expectations we have of you in relationship to your lease, and having that information ready for the institution. So we ask for a signed copy of your lease. And we want to make sure that both you and your landlord sign the lease. It's really important to us, because many of my students have gone by and they've signed off on a lease, but their landlord hasn't. So you can imagine, if I'm a landlord and I don't sign that person's lease, and I decide to add 3 more people to the house, I could just start signing other leases, and now the lease that they gave you, if they don't sign it, is no longer valid. It's not a legal document. So you want to make sure that they signed it and you signed it. You want to make sure every single one of your roommates has signed it, and you want to make sure that our office retains a copy of it. We're always going to request that of you so that we have that documentation to know that you've at least gotten those steps in place, and it also helps us to track everyone's locations on campus.
Just a couple of key areas of things that we would expect that you would do. Some required, some we are just strongly suggesting. First is that part of being in compliance on campus is that you should have provided, if you haven't done so already, a copy of your lease to the Office of Residence Life. One of the problems that we're also having on campus is that when we don't have compliance with people coming to this, as well as providing us with accurate information as to where they're living, the ones who don't comply tend to be the problem houses, tend to be the students who we end up having to do follow-up with. So we want to make sure that you're in compliance, we know where you are, we're not assuming if your home address is Media, but you're living on 16th Street, we want to know you're on 16th Street. If we come across individuals who are not where they're supposed to be, that tends to be a problem. So that's the purpose of us collecting leases, is to make sure we're clarifying where students are in case there are any problems or concerns. Please notify the registrar so that they have accurate information as to where you are, what your mailing address is, so you will get your information in a timely fashion. Some stuff is obviously online, but if there's stuff that needs to be mailed to you, you want to get it on a timely basis, make sure they have the appropriate and accurate information in order to get your information to you. Renters insurance, a topic that some people will say, why? What we would strongly suggest is if you do not have renters insurance, anybody here have renters insurance? Raise your hand. A couple of hands. What you need to understand is it's the same thing for your house when it comes to where your parents or guardians are. Your homeowner's insurance covers your home. It does not cover all the personal belongings inside. So you have to have separate insurance that would insure your property and your valuables within. If you do not have that, if a damage happens to personal belongings, that's not covered often by insurance unless you get a special type of insurance. So we're going to encourage you, if you have expensive electronics, jewelry, clothing, whatever it may be that you value, we would encourage you to get renter's insurance, because your landlord will not be responsible to your personal property being damaged in most cases. Another one of those things of how your lease is written, we call it the fine print. Make sure you're clear on what's covered and what's not. Try to supplement that with renter's insurance to protect yourself. All right, I feel that that's very important. We're going to talk renter's insurance. Smoke detectors. Has everybody checked their house to make sure you have working and active smoke detectors? If not, that is normally something that, by law, landlords are to provide those things for you. By law, I believe smoke detectors are mandatory, but what we would strongly suggest, if it's not required by your lease, is that you also consider carbon monoxide detectors. And sometimes they have dual ones that do both. The purpose of that is older homes, 80 plus years old, that carbon monoxide may back up in the system, particularly related to the HVAC system in a home. And carbon monoxide, odorless. So if there's problems with that and it gets into a house where you're living, you wouldn't notice it. Right? So by having a carbon monoxide detector, that helps save lives tremendously. It's different than the smoke detector. So we would strongly encourage you to do the research and or consider getting those for your home as well if you don't have them already. Plan several emergency escape routes. Knowing your apartment, your house, where your bedroom is located. Are you on the ground floor? Are you upstairs, second floors, third floors? Depending where you're located, make sure that you're familiar with the house to the point where, depending on if there were a fire, if there were a failure of safety to the house, how do you get out of your space? If you're in the basement, we know a lot of partying and stuff happens in basements. Make sure there's more than one way out at all times if you can do that. We're just going to strongly encourage that. You want to make sure you're aware of what the escape routes are. And when I say the escape routes, I don't mean from the police. I mean from danger in its relationship to fire, floods, etc. All right? When you're paying your landlord, sounds pretty simple, sounds like a no-brainer, but make sure whatever method you use that there's proof of payment. We do not suggest paying with cash. We do think that you should pay with a check or a money order, something that's going to give you a way to check and balance what you're doing as a method of payment. So we're going to strongly encourage that. In this day and age with cell phones, you should have emergency numbers programmed in your phone, so that you know the local fire department, the police department, 911 is easy obviously, but make sure you have those numbers either programmed in your phone and or that there's a list somewhere in a centralized location where people could go to that in the event there was a mechanical failure. So we're going to encourage that as well. As I mentioned earlier, when I talk about off-campus behavior versus on-campus, it's really what we look at as what I call double jeopardy. Meaning that most cases, if the police notify the campus or the university of any violations by our students off campus, we are going to address those in addition to whatever the city is going to do. And if the city for some reason chooses to drop charges, but they have corroborated that the behavior that they stated truly happened, that doesn't mean that the university drops charges. We are not the city, we are two separate systems. So I need students to make sure they're clear on that. A lot of times with these underage parties, depending on what happens, sometimes the judge may drop a case. Well, that's the judge's decision. That doesn't mean that Widener's going to drop a case. If we find out and corroborate that underage drinking has occurred and that minors are being served, we're going to address students for those behaviors. Because we're not the law, but we are policy enforcers. So people need to know that. All right? We're not a judge and a jury, and we don't operate under that way. We're a university with policies, rules, and regulations. So students need to be clear on the expectations that we have. Parental notification, whether you live on campus or off. If people go to the hospital and we're made aware of it, we notify parents. If people get arrested, we notify parents. If there are drug or alcohol violations by underage individuals with the alcohol or any age with the drug, we notify parents. So once again, reiterating, don't assume or think for one moment moving off campus means I'm not going to be treated as a typical Widener student. A student is a student is a student, and we address them in that way in a consistent fashion. As I mentioned before, with criminal charges and emergencies, we're going to handle those situations on campus and off in a similar way. We may not come across those things as often, obviously without RAs and campus safety in those particular areas, but when the police do bring those situations to our attention, we are going to address those. All I'll say in relationship to the judicial system is that it doesn't go away, it doesn't change. Whether you are on spring break, if we find out about violations of policy, rules, or regulations, we're going to address those situations. All right? We've had students go to other campuses visiting, and they don't even realize that there are judicial officers at every college or university that has a housing program. They have a person who does my job. And more of them in this particular area between New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and PA. A lot of us get together for conferences and become colleagues. So when somebody goes to another school and violates a policy and they say, well, I'm from Widener, more than often not, that person's going to contact me. And they're going to let me know what's going on, and then I follow up with those students as if it happened right here. So what we're going to do now is hand out a couple of what I call informational sheets related to policies that we have in place and how we will respond to certain types of violations on campus. So hopefully this information, you'll find it helpful, something that will answer some questions for you if you have any related to some of the laws. A lot of this is related to parties and gatherings that the police may or may not be involved in, but we want to make sure that you're clear on the information, that you don't get blindsided if you happen to violate something. Please share this information with your friends. If you're athletes, share it with your teammates that you know that have houses but they didn't come to one of these sessions. If you need to photocopy it, feel free to photocopy it. The issue is to get the information out there to students and to make sure that you're clear on what we expect of you, as well as to share a little bit about Pennsylvania law in relationship to social host responsibility. Because one of the biggest issues with parties is not that we want to spoil your fun. The biggest issue is there's a lot of liability that comes with hosting parties. And that if you serve alcohol to a minor, and then that person leaves your house and either hurts themselves or hurts someone else, the hosts are liable for those types of behaviors. Which is why we take such a strong stance against partying and host responsibility. So we want to make sure that we share that type of information, with you as well.
We want to afford an opportunity for Mr. Barry from Campus Safety to talk a little bit about our partnership.
What I'm going to talk to you guys, ladies and gentlemen, is about how to keep yourself safe off campus. Basically, Dean Lawrence and Dean Bermudez covered a lot of stuff about your legal issues. From a safety perspective, we noticed that students, when they leave off campus, they continue to do those things that they do in the dorm, thinking that they're going to be safe doing the same practices, like leaving their doors open, having people come over without knowing, who they really are. So I have a handout. I'm going to hand out this paper. Basically, the first thing you do, if you notice anything suspicious, call 911. You're off campus, call 911. You have that right to call the police. Also, you can also inform campus safety. If anything happened off campus, you can also call us and we take report. When you're walking in in the area at nighttime, make sure you work in a well-lit area just to keep yourself safe. Work in groups of 2 or 3. The more people you are in a group, the better, the safer you are, okay? Don't prop your doors. I already mentioned that earlier. If you're having a party, know who is coming to your party. Know who they are, okay? Because people tend to invite their friends, friend of a friend. That's not safe, because you are still going to be responsible if anything happened at that party. Then Lawrence kind of beat that horse, the dead horse. So ensure that your windows and your doors are secured. Don't leave boxes of your purchased items like laptop, big screen television. If you buy some of those things, don't leave the boxes outside where people could see it the next day, because you're going to have a burglary happen. I don't know if you checked the newspapers lately. Newman College, they had a couple of break-ins around their campus because people bought big screen televisions and left the boxes outside, and the thieves went in their house and broke into their house and stole all their property. So make sure you secure those boxes inside, or take it to the dumpster and leave it, okay? Don't leave it in front of your house. If you feel unsafe at any time, I already mentioned this, contact campus safety and also contact the police, okay? We do have an escort service that we provide for the students, okay? At nighttime, if you are walking towards 15th Street and Sun Hill, you could call campus safety and we can escort you with our car and drop you up in front of your door if you feel unsafe, okay? Remember, the biggest safety is being aware of your surroundings. You have to be aware of your surroundings. When you're walking at nighttime, don't have your headphones on, and you're walking, not paying attention to what's going on, okay? I'm gonna touch on the underage drinking piece. The fine is stated out here. It's $2,500 for the first offense. And second offense is the same thing, and up to a year term in jail. And remember, you can lose your driver's license if you serve alcohol to minor. You could lose your driver's license. So that's another penalty for underage drinking. The police chief in Chester have issued an order for the officers to ticket and cite people walking around Melrose or around the street blocking sidewalks. I know you guys are not the ones doing it, but make sure you're not congregating on the sidewalk around 14th and Melrose and smoking cigarettes. So if you're doing that, you could be cited by Chester police officer, okay? Just as long as you're moving, they won't cite you, but if you congregate as a group, and they could cite you for blocking the sidewalk. If you ever have any questions about campus safety, just call us. Does everybody know the campus safety number? The 4200 number? Call us. And we have a website also. You can go to campus safety website and look at the services that we provide, okay? We are here 24/7. So if you have any questions any time of the day, call that 4200 number and we should be able to answer your questions.
I think it's important to really talk a little bit about the smoking piece, because more and more of our neighbors are complaining that folks are, because of the ban for smoking in our area on campus, that they're smoking outside of people's homes. So imagine I have student folks that are living in Sun Hill who are complaining that their neighbors, who are also students, are smoking outside their bedroom window and they don't love it. And you can imagine if you're not a smoker and it's coming into your house, people have a right to not have secondhand smoke come in their house and not have it, invade their space and their clothes and all of that kind of stuff. So the expectation is that folks are just respectful. And the whole idea of many of the things that we talked about tonight is a theme of mutual respect. So it's working with your neighbor to respect them and also expecting some of that in return. You should also know that if you have issues that happen in your neighborhood, so it's not just about what you may be doing, it could be about what your neighbor's doing, could be about an issue you're having with the city, it could be about some issue with your landlord. I've had a lot of students come to us and seek our services for those things. I obviously don't have control of the landlord, but oftentimes we are able to act on your behalf and talk to a landlord and at least let the city know what's going on, and or call the landlord and say, you know, we have an expectation here that our student was going to be taken care of, and here's the information that we've been provided. We have had different issues with that, and of course, like I said, we don't control the landlords and what they're doing, but we can help to advocate for you, and we can help to look at things that are happening in the city. We certainly have left a lot of information for you tonight. Do you have any questions for us while we're still here? Yes?
Do you need one signed lease for everybody who lives in the house, or is one lease with everybody's name on it okay?
One lease with everyone's name on it is fine, as long as you all sign it and the landlord signs it. That's a perfect lease. I know students who have variations of that. Those are sticky situations. If one of you doesn't sign the lease, they could leave, and then you have to pay their rent because they're not obligated to do that. Lots of things could happen. They could damage the house, and then you have to pay for those damages. You're not really covering yourself appropriately unless you all sign the same lease and your landlord signs it and dates it at the same time.
So you just need one copy of it and it's gonna
Yes, we only need one copy of that. Other questions? Thanks for your attention. We're going to ask, just to make sure that we know you were here tonight, we're passing around a sign-in sheet. If you could go ahead and just sign in for us, we'd very much appreciate that.